Justin Trudeau has shown little care for Canadian Hindus, and it's time for our community to stand up. If we don't, our temples will continue to be attacked by Khalistanis and will be ignored. But no one's talking about how this affects Canadian Hindus like me, born and raised right here in Canada with no ties to India, yet somehow we're caught in the middle just because we're Hindu. It seems like our voices don't matter, and we've let this happen. Trudeau's government has done nothing for us, yet we still don't speak up. In this video, I'll talk about the history of Sikhism, the rise of the Khalistan movement, and how Canadian Hindus have become stuck between the politicians, the Khalistanis, because we lack the courage to stand up for ourselves. Finally, I'll share with you a call to action that every Hindu in Canada must do if you want to see a change within our community. Sikhism originated in the 15th century in the Punjab region, which is now split between India and Pakistan. At the time, both Hinduism and Islam were experiencing significant change in the region. Guru Nanak, the founder and the first Sikh Guru, emphasized the idea of Ek Onkar, one supreme reality. He rejected both Hindu polytheism and Islamic dogma, promoting unity and challenging caste systems and religious conversions. Sikhism, however, is a Dharmic tradition, not to be confused with any of the Abrahamic faiths, and it developed in a combined relationship with Hinduism. Many early Sikhs practiced aspects of both faiths, and the religious landscape of Punjab allowed for fluid identities and practices. According to scholars like Giorgio Shani, Sikhism in its early days was a diverse and fuzzy community, with some traditions overlapping with Hinduism. The concept of Khalistan, a separate homeland for Sikhs, emerged in the mid-20th century, primarily as a response to the perceived discrimination and marginalization of Sikhs within India. The partition of India in 1947, followed by the post-partition violence, exacerbated these feelings of insecurity and discrimination. Sikhs began to assert their distinct identity and demand greater autonomy within India, arguing that their unique culture and history warranted a separate homeland. They also raised concerns about various political and social issues, including the distribution of resources, religious discrimination, and the control of Sikh religious institutions. In the 1970s and the 1980s, a small but vocal group of Sikhs became increasingly radicalized and resorted to militant tactics to achieve their goals of a separate homeland. But more on that later. The Air India bombing was a tragic event that occurred on June 23, 1985, resulting in the deaths of all 329 people on board. 268 of those individuals were Canadians, making it the deadliest terror attack on Canadian soil.
Realized that there would probably be no survivors.
329 people, 86 of them children, are dead.
The suspects, Sikh extremists hoping for an independent homeland in India.
Sadly, this event doesn't register for Canadians as a Canadian terror attack since the victims were of Indian origin. Today, the Khalistanis have been allowed to grow their support base in the diaspora, Canada being a prime example. Hinduism in Canada has a history that is tied to Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. During the 1970s and the 1980s, there was an influx of immigrants from around the world to Canada as the doors opened up. My father was part of this group when he arrived in Canada in 1972 from the island of Trinidad and Tobago. Today, if you ask many older Canadians, particularly those not born in this country, why they think highly of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, one answer stands out. He opened Canada's doors to immigrants. These group of immigrants were the initial wave that established a Hindu presence in Canada by building temples. These individuals sacrificed their time, raised money, and worked hard to establish physical Hindu spaces. I know it wasn't easy as I lived through this in the 80s and the 90s, so I know what the sacrifices entailed. The problem that Hindus find themselves in today is a direct result of the loyalties of the early immigrants to the legacy of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Many have argued, however, that Trudeau Sr. doesn't live up to his legacy. But I know for that generation that came in the 70s and the 80s, it's a moot point. Since July of 2022, there have been increasing vandalism and attacks on Hindu temples here in Canada. July 2022, Vishnu Mandir in Richmond Hill, attacked. September 2022, BAPS Toronto, attacked. January 2023, Gauri Shankar Mandir in Brampton, attacked. February 2023, Ram Mandir located in Mississauga, Ontario, attacked. April 2023, BAPS in Windsor, Ontario, attacked. July 2024, BAPS in Edmonton, attacked. The first question that came to my mind is, why are Hindu temples being targeted by Khalistanis? This next clip probably holds the answer. Speaking here was Hardeep Singh Nijjar at the World Sikh Organization Convention on July 28, 1984 at Madison Square Gardens in New York City. He was calling for the murder of 50,000 Hindus in response to Operation Blue Star, a military operation conducted by the Indian Army between June 1st and June 10th, 1984, under the orders of then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to remove Sikh militants from the Golden Temple in Amritsar, Punjab. Operation Blue Star and the ensuing 1984 riots made Sikhs feel alienated from the Indian government. They stopped thinking of themselves as part of India, and instead they started to think of themselves as a separate group of people, a Sikh community spread out all over the world. The enemy for them is the Indian government, and Hindus, who form the majority of the population in India, who elect the Indian government by default, also become their enemy. So what does that mean for Hindus in Canada, like myself, with no ties to India? We by default also become the enemy, by virtue of the fact that we're Hindu. That is why Hindu temples are attacked. They accuse Hindus of being loyal to India's current government, calling it nationalist or even fascist. These groups use language that make Hindus seem like that they don't fit into places in Canada and America, sometimes saying that Hindus support unfair systems like caste discrimination. They even tried to scare Christians in North America by focusing on how Hinduism has many gods. Meanwhile, issues within their own communities like crime or extremism are ignored. This problem is a confusing one because in India, Khalistanis are in a very small minority. You go abroad, however, and this changes with vocal supporters living in Canada, the US, UK, and Australia. These groups also use ideas like fighting racism and hate to avoid criticism while blaming Hindus for all of their problems. Hindus, who tend to focus on fitting in and doing well in their new countries, don't usually push back as strongly, making them easy targets for these accusations. Today in Canada, I find myself in a position where I don't have a voice when it comes to the Khalistanis and the increased violence towards Hindus. You would think that temples being vandalized would have galvanized the community together to advocate for a stronger Hindu voice. As you saw earlier in this video, the leaders of our temples have a false sense of loyalty to the Trudeau name. You can write all the letters you want, but it means nothing if you are going to perform arti of Justin Trudeau in front of the murtis of your temple. So in effect, we have Khalistanis in bed with our politicians on one side, and on the other side, we have a non-existent Hindu leadership that is failing to advocate for the average Canadian Hindu. We haven't succeeded in creating a true voice that the Canadian people respect. We are simply the dressing on the side that politicians can cozy up to for a nice photo. At no point should we ever allow a Hindu temple to be vandalized, but here we are in 2024, happening over and over and over again. These are hate crimes fueled by their hatred towards Hindus. Many Canadian politicians avoid speaking out strongly against the Khalistani groups because they are scared of losing votes from the Sikh community. Politicians don't want to upset this important group, so they stay quiet instead of taking action, even when they know they should. This fear of losing votes makes them choose what's easy over what's right. So what is it you can do as a Canadian Hindu? First, find your voice and don't be a soft Hindu. You need to speak and you need to act. Don't hide in your homes. Demand that all your elected officials denounce Khalistani separatism. This takes courage and it takes guts. Write letters, talk to your MP, pressure them by telling them what you as a Hindu are going through when you see your temples being attacked. The next one is probably even harder. Demand that all of the temple administrators stop bowing down to elected officials. Remember that these elected officials depend on us to vote them in. If you are part of a temple administrative group, make sure that you vet all politicians coming to your event. If they support Khalistanis, don't invite them. It's that simple. Get involved at your local temple. If you are not a regular volunteer, no one will ever listen to you. The Hindu demographics have changed within Canada the last number of years, and you need to have your voice heard. The final thing you can do is support my channel. There are not a lot of people speaking about the issues affecting Hindus in the diaspora, whether it be in Canada or anywhere outside of India. I depend on you to like, comment, subscribe, so that we can face these issues affecting our community together. The Khalistan issue, it's not over, and in the coming years and months, I will certainly have more to say on this subject. Om Shanti.